Welcome back, everyone. And with that, we're all set for our final panel discussion, but please just stay with us because after that, we also have a closing keynote. Now, talking about the final panel discussion, it all boils down to a very, very interesting and a very intriguing topic, a topic that's often discussed, especially even on social media. And we see a lot of participation, we see a lot of interest that's gathered, but let's actually find out the ground reality when we focus on gender equality, pay parity and women empowerment. Why are we lagging behind? When we talk about it on social media, it looks like everybody's gung-ho about it, everybody's learning about it, but let's actually get a reality check on it, and let's find out as to why are we actually lagging behind. So yes, I believe somewhere while we are trying to get the answers, there's going to be a devil's advocate also that's going to be happening in order to understand this very question, a topic that is way more pertinent in today's times. Now, spearheading this panel discussion for all of us, we have as Captain Jyotsna Malhotra, retired, Head Employee Engagement, Diversity and Inclusion, TVS Motor Company, who comes armed with more than 20 years of experience in talent management, organization development, collaborative learning as well. And she's been the face of organizations in private and public sector focusing on concept building, manpower strategy, collaborative learning, employee engagement, and diversity and inclusion. We also have with us Ms. Sheetal Sandhu, Group CHRO, ICRA, who comes with more than 16 years of industry experience, having led people strategies like hiring on niche assignments, compensation designs, increasing employee engagement and retention index, ensuring cost control measures for the teams, functions, and driving innovation agenda to achieve greater operational excellence. While we talk about a prolific set of speakers, may I also introduce our next speaker, Ms. Bindu James, Director, Talent Management, Learning and Development, Diversity, Equity as well as inclusion. I'm guessing that's equality as well, with HARMAN International, who comes with more than 2 decades of experience, wherein she has successfully driven organizational development through various strategic interventions. In fact, she's someone who's known to have an excellent track record of developing and implementing innovative talent management solutions. We also have with us Ms. Nandini Sarkar, Global Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Leader, India, Boeing. In fact, coming with more than 2 decades of HR experience, being a culture curator and an inclusion strategist, Nandini has deep and wide exposure in the domain of ED&I, L&D, OD, leadership excellence, mentoring, culture building, and change management, all earned through working across various industries. We also have with us Ms. Ankita Gupta, Head HR India, Maldives, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Bhutan with Moet, Hennessy. In fact, as a human resource management professional, she comes with more than 15 years of progressive HR experience, a strategic partner that she is a business partner and a coach for business leaders and CXOs as well. Well, let's continue and let's also introduce our next set of speakers. We have with us Ms. Hina Dhamija, Senior Business Partner, Human Resources, Hero Housing Finance, who comes with more than 14 years of experience in human resources, aligning HR with business strategy with focus on accelerated growth of the organization. And finally, we have with us Ms. Vandana Shejwal, Senior Human Resources Professional, who comes with more than 20 years of rich experience. In fact, in her role as a head of human resource function, she's also developed and executed human resources strategy in support of the overall business plan and strategic direction of the organizations. So I can clearly and very, very safely say that there's a wonderful saying that a woman on a mission needs no permission. So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, let's get this beautiful panel discussion started, and let me hand over the proceedings to Jyotsna. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Kavya. Thank you for such a warm introduction. Moving on to the subject, ladies, welcome on board on the panel. See, diversity, equity, and inclusion has a very different dimension today than it was a decade back. Today, diversity charters are made by organizations with focus pillars. Few of them to mention include gender, veterans, persons with disability, LGBTQ, generationally different people, and employees. Well, talking today specific on gender, which is our agenda today, let us begin with some facts here. Despite making 50% of the global population, women generate only 37% of GDP. And when we talk specific to India, it's merely 17%. With COVID around and various research on the space, we understand that women are the more who are losing jobs, specific in unorganized sectors, in sectors like retail, customer service, etc., bringing this number from 17% to even lower. Even in my organization, which is a pure manufacturing organization, TVS Motor Company, overnight turnover into a work from home organization was a surprise for everyone. Overnight guidelines were issued, case to case basis, all employees were accommodated, reasonable accommodation were offered to ensure that each employee, each individual has some space to ensure they are working in a more enabled manner than ever before. At the same time, a positive indicator also shows that studies are happening, people are hiring more women in strategically driven hiring methods, where mid to senior level hiring has become close to 40% in the past 1 year. Today, if I talk about my organization, we have close to 15% women, which is unique, especially in manufacturing, automotive sector. This did not happen overnight. Today, we have an engine assembly line fully run solely by women and highly appreciated by our head of manufacturing, Mr. J. Bhaskaran, on zero rework and minimum downtime for this line. It didn't happen unless we had the support from various stakeholders within the organization. And the best of it was that we got recognized as best companies for women in India amongst top 100 in India across sectors. All this can happen when we have built a proper process and ecosystem with a clear positive intent and support from various stakeholders within the system. So with you all on board, let us hear from your experiences on how DE&I roadmap is looking like. To begin with, I would like to say that various recent panel discussions also we have seen health and well-being emerged as a key subject. Consulting firms are talking about creating some measurement matrix around health and well-being and measuring employees' well-being. In the recent employee engagement survey, when we talk about TVS, we had 82% on health and well-being. How do you see it happening for various other organizations? How do you think organizations have continued to focus on D&I with health and well-being with COVID around? I think Ankita, since you are coming from a global organization, how do you see? Would you like to take this, and help us understand?
Thank you, Jyotsna. Good evening, everyone. Very glad to be here. With these unprecedented times, the concept of DE&I and wellness has taken on completely different and a new look and feel. There's a lot that has happened, but there's a lot that needs to happen and be adapted with these changing circumstances, So I like to share our journey at Moet Hennessy, the bridges we've crossed. There's a lot more that we need to still do and cross these more bridges, and how we've been championing wellness and self-care to build this as a muscle and a way of life every day at work, So Moet Hennessy, for those of you who don't know, is the wines and spirits business of Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy, which is a French multinational company, one of the largest luxury companies in the group in the world. In India, we are the largest of the LVMH businesses, and we sell imported wines and spirits, and also a sparkling wine, which is made out of Nasik. So our business obviously was very badly affected when the COVID hit us. But in spite of that, as a leadership team, we decided that we will continue to commit ourselves to building inclusion at workplace and keeping it as a business priority. And, so D&I continued to stay as a business priority for us. As an industry, if most of you know, wines and spirits is predominantly has been a very, very male dominated sector. When I joined the company at the 7.5 years back, I was one of the very few women in the sales team, only 2 women in the leadership team, never ever the diversity in the company was more than, female diversity was more than 5 to 10%. The background diversity was that 70 to 80% of the people always moved within the industry, and we never had people joining from outside of the industry. But today, very happy to share, obviously, there was a lot of work that happened that, Today, one third of the women are females. At the middle to the leadership level, we are about 50-50. To an extent, the executive leadership team, we are 80% women, and 50% of the population comes from outside of wines and spirits industry. So, so a lot of progress, has been made in the last few years. 2 years back, as a leadership team, we decided that how do we make this, more sustainable? Because obviously hiring was one of the ways, so we, as a leadership team, we decided that what is the strategy forward, what do we need to do? What does success look like for us? What are the milestones we need to cross? And any change or transformation to be successful, the leadership needs to walk the talk and commit to it. So we held leaders responsible to drive this as a form of a metrics. At the same time, for any change to happen, employees should feel that it's a part, like they're a part of it, it's being done for them. So what we did was that we created communities of employees which had champions who would drive this around three major areas or pillars. The biggest one for us, which we had still attained a lot of progress, we wanted to sustain, was managing representation, not only gender background. And there the focus now was how do we make it sustainable by growing internal talent and creating a pipeline for women, especially to, keep progressing. The second area was how do you continue managing these differences? So that was a lot of communication, sensitization, awareness, unconscious bias training, hiring manager trainings. And the third one was how do you manage this and put this all together in terms of managing the organization culture, which means like setting the basics right, starting from policies, systems and processes, looking at different aspects of the culture, finding role models, and at the same time recognizing people and people managers who have been kind of, championing this and the employees. To an extent that all our development programs and initiatives, that we built an element of living the inclusive behaviors in order to make diversity and inclusion a way of working and a shared responsibility for all. Obviously, COVID continued to through challenges, so when COVID hit us, we went back to the employees to understand and use the time to pulse check on how employees were feeling about all the initiatives, what more needs to be done. What interestingly came out was that two areas, obviously inclusion was a need which was stated very clearly that we continue to drive it. But the aspect of well-being, came out very, very strongly. And within the aspect of well-being, two aspects of well-being, which was emotional and mental, came out much more strongly. Even as a company where we had started the journey of well-being much before where COVID hit us, where we had a model where we looked at 6 different aspects of well-being, which is physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, social, and environmental. But the very fact that the need for more initiatives or continued efforts around mental and emotional well-being was quite interesting to see. Now, though we understand it, it was about 12 months back when we are talking about this. What we quickly did was adapted, like most of the companies, our policies. We set up an employee assistance program, had wellness hours, wellness sessions. The idea was to encourage these conversations and people to kind of talk about it and accept that these are the challenges. I think one of the very good help that helped us was we partnered with Thrive Global, because obviously we were not expert in this field. They introduced us to a concept of micro steps and how we can work towards changing the behaviors around wellness and self-care while working remotely. What now? So future of work for us, obviously, like a lot of organizations, looks like as a hybrid work environment. We're looking at piloting a program where we are planning to train a group of employees to be mental health first aiders. We'll continue to adapt our policies in order to create a social environment or ecosystem where everyone feels included. Well, it may be social distancing, but it's not emotional distancing. And we still have a lot of work to do in addressing mental health and driving self-care. And I think as a community of HR people, a lot of us can do a lot more and learn for each other with each other. And I'm leaving you all with that thought. And happy to be here to be, learning a lot from this esteemed panel today. Thank you.
Thanks, Ankita, for summing it up. I think a lot of organizations have done a lot of work around this space on emotional and mental well-being. If I talk about my organization, we partnered with Your Dost, and we do have some metrics monthly basis trying to understand what are the priorities that employees are setting for themselves in terms of taking charge of their well-being. Thank you. Thanks for summing it up. Moving ahead, we have come a long way from globally, in terms of globally as well, nationally on the subject of diversity and inclusion in past decade. Organizations have a separate role called D&I. They set up diversity councils, committees, employee resource groups with specific focus on inclusion. So what are the catalysts for this sudden change? As a team of experienced professionals, I think this is a subject to debate on, that what has suddenly changed so quickly, where we see organizations, there is a need to suddenly focus on D&I. And how do you see this emerging in the future, possibly in past 5 to 10 years, if we can focus to begin with, would be wonderful. Vandana, would you, with your background and diverse experience, would you like to throw some light on this? Vandana, I think you're mute. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Thanks, Jyotsna. So basically, diversity and inclusion is such a vast subject that, it's very difficult to talk about it in such gamut of past, present, and the future. I'll just try and put it in, as short as possible. So human being is a social animal, so, and it keeps evolving all the time. It wants to improve its life and, make changes for the best. So these changes haven't really happened suddenly, so the fact that we are social animal, everything that happens in society impacts us. So if I have to relate really diversity and inclusion in society, we will have to go way back to all the social movements that included giving voting rights to women, giving rights to work for women, civil rights movement, which facilitated people with various backgrounds and ethnicities and colors to have rights to work. So there are a lot of social movements that happened actually way before, the industries and corporates started talking about diversity and inclusion. But if you see, even in the corporates, in the last several years, a lot has happened. There are many progressive, matured organizations who have done a lot of work in the last several years. In fact, they've started publishing reports, and which has kind of, all good things multiply, it has good effects. So similarly, a lot of organizations, whether it is compulsory by some act or no, have replicated that in their practices, best practices, I would say. So we would like to adopt whatever good is happening. And similarly, and so it's not only about copying things, but it's also about the necessity or the need. So you talked about the catalyst. The fact that, we as a social animal wouldn't want to keep ourselves restricted to some groups. We would want to relate to more people, talk to more people, interact with more people, and hence want to be part of the larger group. Not only our own small society, but the city, country, and the globe as such. Increase in the population has led to the movement of labor, from one country to the other. So if you don't diversify, would we be able to meet the needs of the growing, the industrial movements that are happening, the need for the diverse workforce? It won't be possible unless we really include everyone, people from various nationalities and countries. So that's another. Also, the organizations have understood that it is not possible for them to succeed in this competitive world with just few set of people. It's important that we have varied perspectives. It's important that we have a whole lot of different sets of people with various perspectives, different kinds of ways of thinking. so that we are able to meet the needs of the knowledgeable consumers or the clients that we have these days. They say that, either you innovate or you die, so those who don't innovate really die a slow death. So what happens due to diversity is that this diverse set of people bring you a lot of creative solutions, which can be a good offerings for our customers. So that's I feel is a huge advantage, instead of restricting ourselves to a small pool of people, we have larger set of pool of people. When we look at all diverse people, we are able to survive ourselves, gain that market share in the competitive world. And isn't it relevant in this changing world just to have all kinds of people in place? So this is one. The other aspect I would talk a little bit about India. In India also, we didn't really have to fight. The women really didn't have to fight for their voting rights. It came to us naturally in 1947 with the independence. There are a lot of things. Like I said, certain things will happen on their own if people voluntarily will do it. But as a government also has taken a lot of steps. In 1995, PWD Act came up. Of course, the other panelists will talk about it in detail, but I'm just talking about the past, giving a perspective as to how the movement happened. So which gave a push to this whole, people with different abilities. Also recently, again, another act came in place, which is called Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And which again gives a little more further push, and which makes sure that people with different abilities are not discriminated. So this is about the present. Now going forward, what is going to happen is that it's not going to be enough. Just one second. So I think we are, what is happening is that we are moving from diversity to inclusion to equity. Okay, so going forward, what is going to be, it's not going to be enough to just have the numbers in place. It's not going to be enough to just publish some numbers. No, we will have to make sure that we involve everybody, the diverse workforce, in our decision makings, in our ways of working, making sure that they don't leave the organization. So I'm not talking about retention per se, but if we don't really involve people from diverse backgrounds, eventually they will leave, feel frustrated and leave. So inclusion is going to be very important going forward. Equity is going to be very important going forward. So it's involving them and also making sure that they are able to produce the same results as those who come from the privileged class, those who come from good backgrounds, or those who are able to deliver results without any support. So making sure that we support, train people who are less privileged, and making sure that everybody is on the equal footing is going to be the way forward. So I can already see some progress in this direction, from just the medical insurance cover to coverage of the gender reconstruction surgeries. First day period leave is something that we are seeing, which is very, very unique. A firm in Mumbai has already done that, and it's talk of the town. Giving unique, not only giving different treatment to disabled individuals, but making sure that we have unique designs which will not make them feel that they are different, having those similar designs for everyone in the organization, and not only making those different workstations for those differently abled people. Voice recognition systems whereby people with differently able people are able to work smoothly. So making sure, so it's not only their wheelchair that makes them handicap, but it's also about the access. So how do we give them a good access? So going forward, it's going to be more progressive thought, more progress in this direction, moving from numbers, the facts to the behavior, from facts to the attitude. I think is going to be the way forward. Thank you, Jyotsna.
Thank you, Vandana. Thanks a lot. I think I can correlate to what you are mentioning. When I entered the D&I space for the first time, the first document I came across was a FoW study, which said that women are needed because they bring a perspective of a customer. So if a customer is a female, which is a lot happening today, right? Even in my industry, automotive, we have segments which are specific to women. So if we are going to have a woman riding a two-wheeler, why not have them on board to actually design it in a much better and a much customer focused kind of a way? And similarly, in your organizations as well, you would have seen it. And I think that's where the value proposition and the innovation they bring in, and also with persons with disability, the kind of propositions they are able to offer. If even a touch phone that we use was actually designed for persons with disability rather than normal people like us who enjoy the privilege of using it. So keeping that in mind, I think you have summed it up really amazingly. Moving ahead, I think we can take on to the subject of battle for diverse talent, which is a very, very important subject today, because now that the focus on diversity is improving, the focus on having them on board is improving. At the same time, everybody wants it, right? So the battle has become even more fierce. So how do you think the staffing strategies amongst the organizations are getting designed or are getting, ramped up to ensure that we have more diverse and inclusive workforce on board? And I think, Hina, you're just the right person to answer this with your experience with Hero and various other organizations. I think we would like to hear from you how you think it's happening.
Sure. Thanks, Jyotsna, for asking this question. Before I start, I would like to thank Harish for giving this opportunity, and certainly to this platform and my fellow panelists and the viewers. It's wonderful to be here. Before I start, I would like to add a disclaimer. Whatever I will share here on this platform is basis my personal view as a practitioner in the domain, and basing the survey reports, like Jyotsna said, for DNI, especially the FoW survey. So too many insights from there. So it is nothing personally related to the organization, Hero, or the previous BFSI sectors I have worked upon. As my colleagues Jyotsna, Vandana, and Ankita did share upon the challenges what we are facing. So diversity is actually a bigger challenge. Many organizations today even see the diversity and inclusion as a complex subject, and in fact a burdensome task, because it's not having an assured payoff. And leaders often say that, how to start their efforts on DNI, whether the turnover, whether they'll get the results or not. And at times they, would like to turn away from the initiatives as they are not sure to get the tractions. But certainly, if we as a association or a part of organization consider it as a sense of responsibility for shifting it as a business imperative instead of a burden, certainly there going to be a certain change. And as per the FoW's survey I have read, it's going to be certainly a magnet for top talent, and ultimately will result in higher retention and employee satisfaction. Because as we talk about diversity and inclusivity as a big challenge, retention for mid to senior level is also the biggest challenge what we are facing. So today, we'll talk about some of the strategies on the staffing for DNI, what we will be discussing and over this platform. First of all, before I start a strategy, I would like to share, it's not about only hiring the diversity and the inclusivity in our organization. For this, there requires a certain framework, a mindset, framework within the organization, and a mindset for the management. For this, to start with, certainly the organizations are requiring an external support to counsel the existing employees, to counsel the management how to start and how to it will be taken care. Because before we start with the staffing strategy and hiring a diversity and inclusivity, it is important to set a background, and especially the committees required to form to deal with it. because it is very sensitive matter. Also, it is important to be appropriately having the background and committees in place, plus the counseling session for the management and employees to have a right culture and environment in the organization. So moving ahead, when we talk about the strategies for staffing, to start with, there are many, diversifying the pool. So when we say adding on to the diversity, it is about, adding on to the in-hand intake of talent other than the experienced talent from the industry and non-experienced from the industry, but having the experience. So generally, these are the two sets across the industry we are hiring, other than we heard of this nomenclature D&I, and we at the organization level, every industry working upon. So, to diversify the pool, it is important to see few aspects. Those are allowing, women who would like to come back after the sabbatical or the break, the ones, who want to do the second innings, maybe have taken a mud their hands into the business, and the transgender people, the specially challenged people. So diversifying the pool is important aspect. And when we say diversifying the pool, with this, it is about offering the extra support to them, like work from home offers, more opportunities in terms of the flexible work hours, and even giving the flexibility to the existing employees to, look for a conducive role within the organization, which can be managed from home. So these are the few aspects in terms of diversifying the pool we have. And when we say about all this, so many organizations have hiring a person from outside, especially who have already done certain work. There are many NGOs and organizations, that what kind of environment, like maybe the mailers and awareness of inclusivity and diversity, wheelchair accessibility, and much more, like how and what we are planning to add on to a pool. By this, another important strategy, what I see, is creating a source mix also into the diversity. A source mix can be, the internships, freelancers, volunteers, consultants, and the part-time workers, who are maybe not from the industry, but giving a chance, the housewives, the full-time employees who would like to move to the another role within the organization, and much more. And, it's glad to see the wave into the insurance sector, especially, of the sales. I don't want to name the organization, but yes, many organizations, two of the organizations into the insurance sector have hired, retired bankers and the ex-government licensors and the ex-engineer projectors, who have done wonderfully well, in selling the insurance as compared to the actual employee. So it is really glad, and it has been proven that if given a chance to diversity and inclusivity, there is no dearth of the talent, and we can definitely attract the right talent, and it is a magnet. Over to the next strategy, the quick one, it is important to redo the job description also. When we say redo the job description, it is important, first of all, a very basic, in addition to the general, headers for the job description, to have the job description being gender neutral. Plus, when we say the job liners and the titles should have an inclusive language, not to put a pressure. So these are certain basic things, in terms of the job description, while we are defining to add into the strategy. So if I talk about more strategy, there is a lot, like blind interviews, blind resumes, having how to work on the branding, and goes on. I would request, my colleague Sheetal here to throw some light on the more strategies. Thank you. Thank you, Jyotsna.
Thanks, Hina. So I'll just amplify what Hina has said. I think it's a tricky path. I mean, trying to first get your organization to say that it is an important thing to have D&I and equality, and then to staff people on it becomes, a lot trickier. Having said that, let's look at what are we talking about. We are talking about inherent diversity, which is, natural diversity comes from race, gender, ethnicity, and all of that. The other part is actually acquired diversity, where we are saying that it is fluid. You can actually develop and evolve, whether it is your experience, your languages, the type of languages you can, talk through, the knowledge you gather, right? So we will need to create a mindset change in our leadership. And I think all of you have actually touched upon that time while trying to create those staffing strategies in place. And like Hina, I'm going to give you a little practitioner's view of how some of the organizations may be doing it, right or wrong. I think that still needs to be established. Successful, unsuccessful. I think the idea is to keep these policies and processes at the back of your cultural output, right? And culture is a long debate. Is it an input or is it an output? I think somewhere the DNA of the organization needs to talk about having that kind of mindset to start staffing people on, with this diverse background. Having said that, I'll amplify on blind resumes. I think thanks to technology, right? Had it been 5 years, 10 years ago, we would have not been able to do this, to say that we can blindside or black out the personal information of people and, maybe just present the actual core competence or the acquired diversity for a candidate as against the inherent diversity. And this is not easy said and done. When you get to the implementation, the hiring manager will actually ask the recruiter that whether, where does this come from? Who is this person? Which organization? And, all that. Blacking out personal information is actually the first step in terms of making sure that you are, irrespective of the race, gender, ethnicity, and, any other inherent diversity things, you're able to present a candidature a little more, I'll say, towards less biased view. At least let your hiring manager take a stab at it without considering all those considerations. The other is around blind interviews, right? This could be actually some text-based interviews. You can actually make use of a lot of AI tools. A lot of platforms are available these days from an ATS perspective, where some initial screening can be done while the actual video calling or actual in-person discussion is done. So that you're creating a pool of people towards that hiring piece. Your sourcing is actually becoming much more effective. While otherwise, it may just get dropped at the stage of a resume shortlist and all of that. And we all know that it is thanks to our ecosystems, thanks to our societal pressures. I think while it is being discussed and deliberated so much, all of us have to imbibe this, somewhere inherently that, this needs to take a different shape and form. I'm sure all of you have heard about Rooney Rule, right? Rooney Rule at an executive leadership hiring, because I think that's another favorite topic of mine, to ensure how do we get executive hiring positions, and every woman should apply for one executive role being opened in the organization. And it's quite a famous phenomena in the football. When they actually hire coaches, they are supposed to interview at least one minority and ethnic minority specifically for the state or that region. So I think if you try applying some of this as an HR or as D&I practitioners, I think it goes a long way, at least making women, reach to the top. And I say this as we sit here in India, out of maybe 50 companies, only one CEO is declared as women. So I think we have quite inroads to make out there. Last but not the least, Hina has spoken about it. I'm going to say, make your brand, employer brand or D&I brand. Don't only talk about it in your campus pitches and in the general routine affairs, but actually display your success stories through social media, through varied platforms, wherever you think you are showcasing your employer brand. And I see these days on LinkedIn, so much of support on the employer brand, where colors are getting changed. But why just celebrating June, right? We can actually do this as inherent part of our employer brand and make it as a employee value proposition. I think that will go a long way in staffing strategy. So those are my quick views.
Thank you. Thanks, Sheetal, for summing it up. I would also like to add here, see what you mentioned about making a thumb rule of women representation for selection, for interviews, or even any diverse talent. To have at least one on selection panel would be helpful. But at the same time, even training the people who are interviewing, they should not be asking such silly questions, or I mean, maybe not silly, but the kind of biased questions which typically bring out a viewpoint which is not acceptable, a viewpoint which is actually very, very biased. So training our people who are managers and talent acquisition team members would also be equally helpful, I think so, as part of a strategy. And rather everybody on board, starting from senior leadership itself. Moving on to the next subject, which is very, very close to my heart, is on notion for male allies, right? The journey for diversity would not have begun if there was nobody amongst the leadership who are generally men, if we talk about our country. And unless we have somebody who could support the overall agenda of diversity. So how do you guys think the notion of male allyship is happening, and how the journey on gender equality is looking like? Nandini, I would request you if you would like to throw some light on this.
Thank you for the question, Jyotsna, and a warm hello to everyone who's joined us today. So diversity is in nature and inclusion is in the nurture. I believe in thinking together, and allyship is a big asset to further the cause of inclusion. And each one of us are in our unique journey of allyship. And if we look at the continuum of 4 A's in allyship, being apathetic with no understanding of the issue. One can be aware with basic concepts known, but not active for self or on behalf of any other. One can be, active, well-informed, sharing and seeking diversity when prompted or, asked for. And being an advocate means being committed, routinely and proactively championing the cause of mainstreaming. So as women, where do we see us positioned in this journey? It's good to talk about men, but it is also good to do a baselining to understand where are women in the workplaces today in their own unique journey of allyship. I begin with seeking. When we talk about men as allies, do we know what men think about the challenges facing women and why? How does workplace culture influence the dynamic of men and, and at the same time, those who would want to help? What prevents men from taking up the journey of being an ally? And what does it take to ignite the change in attitude and action on part of men, especially those in positions of power? That was your specific question, Jyotsna. So are we saying men are not with us in this journey? Can't be so. If I go back to my lived experiences, and it tells a different story, be it in my personal life or in the workplaces that I have kind of built my experience on, I have had the best of interactions with male allies in advancing the cause of gender equity. Yes, you heard me correct. I'm using the word equity here because equity is the path to create a level playing field, and then only we can create equality. And as I said, we are all on our unique journey in life. So each one of us has seen a unique starting point to our professional careers. How can we talk about equality when the starting points have not been the same? Now, building on this premise, equity is definitely the leveler at every step of any employee's life cycle, including pay equity, which is a big buzz in some parts of the world, yet to catch on when we talk about it in India. There may be some commitments, pledges, and statements given in the job portals of many of the organizations, but are we living the essence is a question we need to ask ourselves, men and women alike at workplaces. So let's realize that we are few of those privileged souls who have had all the support to be where we are today. And at the same time, let us also take acceptance of the fact that there are majority of us who still need support. There is a definite gap when that we are trying to bridge here by getting the dominant group into the conversation. And that's where men as allies become a real game changer. So why do we see that gap in the intention? The intention is there, but there is also a gap. So I would, ascribe the gap to few of the reasons. One, the belief. Men tend to act as individuals believing they are not influenced by any group or culture. When I say this, please do not take it as a blanket statement. It is the generalistic view that we get to hear and feel at times. Sense of denial. Men tend to be in their privileged bubbles and doesn't sense that there is gender bias. Feeling of awkwardness. There may be a sense that gender bias exists, but they are unsure to start the journey of allyship because they don't know where to start or how to start. There are several kinds of fears associated with men being allies. One, there's a fear of being caught in the crossfire of restrictive forces like Me Too movement. It could be the POSH Act as well. And this is a big question mark here. How many of us have socialized the provisions of Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act 2013 in the right essence? Because I have many experiences shared with me by many colleagues and many peers, industry peers who are male, that the way it is done, it instills a lot of fear. And we don't even feel like talking to women beyond the project need. That's not what we want to instill. We don't want to instill fear. Another biggest challenge that lies is the challenge of speaking up. Speaking up and acting on behalf remains a big challenge. And the last but not the least, some you will always find at the fence where the bystander syndrome kicks in. So let me share from my experience, how can we change the narrative? Enable tools and resources to sense barriers. Appeal to the sense of fair play. Use the power of storytelling to influence. Help male allies define self-interest in promoting the cause. Because we know there's a common question that we all ask, what's in it for me? Make your male allies see that. Create a culture of support for male allies and promote candid conversation on the premise of psychological safety. Robust learning environment to build and sustain male allyship is a key to it. And recognizing and rewarding male allies is a big part to it. So not to miss, I would really want to make this point here that the foundation of such mindsets are best sown in the formative years of our development, which means this is an appeal to the parents of future leaders. Gender mainstreaming and going beyond the binary into the realms of intersectionalities is the need of the hour. So latest gender gap index report glares at us and says we are pushing by another generation to achieve gender parity. So it's not women's issue anymore. It's our collective responsibility to build a future of work that has a close correlation to the GDP of the nation. So there is an economic sense to it. And at Boeing, we intentionally promote allyship across cultures and take every route to point to inclusion. We have Mission 30 to achieve in India, and it's in gender inclusion space and go beyond it. We recently released our equity, diversity, and inclusion public report in public domain. So that is a way to show that we are intentional about sustaining the path to inclusion across diversity dimensions, not missing intersectionality, and supplier diversity is a big part in it. And community outreach is definitely not missed. So thank you, Future of Work Summit 2021 organizers, for having me here to share my perspective and enabling me an opportunity to learn from the thought leaders. Over to
Thank you,
Jyotsna.
Nandini. Thank you. Thanks, Nandini. Sheetal, quickly, would you like to add something to
I
it?
think with the interest in time, Nandini has fairly covered it, but I will say communities build communities. So I think apart from men allies, we women need to support each other more. There needs to be a woman at, who's actually holding the table for you if you don't have a seat on the table. So have your sponsorships defined. I mean, if you don't have a sponsor in the organization, and that cuts across, by the way, across gender, it doesn't necessarily need to be women. And because we are talking of equality, women needs to support women more. I'll just conclude on that. Yeah.
Exactly. And keeping that in mind, at TVS also, we recently did a program called Flying Lessons, where we took women through 23 of them, took them through leadership development and assigned them mentors who were part of senior leadership team. And it was not just hand holding, it was also beyond it. We actually apprised mentors of what are the challenges these women were facing. Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot, ladies, on that. And I think there is one agenda which I think organizations are still feeling more challenged about is persons with disability, PWD, how to bring them on board. I think in this space, TVS has done a lot of work where we already had close to 20 of them in the organization, approximately 1%. But having a more structured way to bring them on board started only this year. And it all started with an enabling infra audit, where we could actually see how, what kind of roles. So it was a deep study where we looked at what kind of roles can be assigned to which kind of disability, where we looked at our infrastructure, where we looked at the kind of IT support that can be offered. So it was across blue collar and white collar. It's a very different journey when we talk about persons with disability, because it's more challenging for managers and senior leadership to have the ownership of it in comparison to women, because it's a continuous agenda that has been happening for women. But persons with disability, with the act coming in, and possibly in next 2 years, you will see at least 4%, 2 to 4% of them compulsorily on board for all organizations will be a mandate. So keeping that in mind, I think there is a big gap we see. There are a lot of organizations and consultants who do these audits. There are a lot of consulting firms who bring on board these employees. But at the same time, are we ready? Are our managers ready? Is our ecosystem ready is a bigger challenge. So, keeping this aside and moving ahead on to the final subject today, I would like to ask all of you, now that we have multi-generational employees at workplace, right? So effective engagement has been a challenge with different expectations from multi-generations. How are the organizations managing the ecosystem to ensure it maximizes its potential through meaningful engagement across various generations? Bindu, you would like to share something on this?
Sure. Good evening, everyone, and absolutely delighted to be here as part of this very interesting panel. Thank you, Jyotsna. Great question, and I'm sure this will add a different flavor to the topic today. So if you see, most of the references that we make to diversity and inclusion in India today highlight pretty much around gender and disability. However, organization needs to leverage the strength of multiple generation which is already part of their workforce. And in fact, if you look at it, it's a tremendous transformation that organizations are undergoing currently, having 4 generations, right? Baby boomers, Gen X, Y, and Z, making it truly multi-generational. So it makes then utmost important for every organization to understand which aspect of the business that need to assess to satisfy their employee needs and preferences. Why? That's because there are differences in skill sets, work values, attitudes, and overall approach to life across generations. And these differences can have both a positive and negative impact on organizations. To highlight some of the strengths of having multi-generational workforce are increased creativity, innovations, openness to change, alternative thinking, cross-pollination of ideas, better collaboration. And all these can be leveraged for competitive advantage in terms of business outcomes. Now, if you look into the other side of it, the flip side of it, conflicts delay in decision making, confusions, dysfunctions, they're all likely to increase due to the same reason, the multiple generation in the workforce. Now, this really leads to the counterproductive outcomes, which are obviously attrition, impact on engagement, and workplace stress. So it is this context that actually give rise to the need of understanding multi-generational diversity from the perspectives of employee, the team, and the organization. It's important to ensure that organization actually leverage the strengths and without letting it evolve into conflict. So in my experience, some of the important aspects that organization can actually look into in terms of building that ecosystem is firstly leadership, a good leadership, which is one of the most important prerequisites of creating a positive work culture. The way they communicate with generations across their organization is absolutely crucial. I'm sure most of the organization might be working. So in HARMAN International, we have this specific module as part of most of our key leadership programs. Apparently, most of the research data shows that this still continues to be a gray area and we have a long way to go. Another way of creating the ecosystem is through accelerated reverse mentoring. Pairing the junior employee to a senior one, who obviously can fall into different generation, right? So that enables different perspectives built within the organization. Workplace visibility and transparency. Now, this may not be like a very popular topic among older generations, but then if you look into the millennials or the Generation Z, employees want complete transparency from their employers. Access to information. This is not about how well informed the employees are about important company information. It is also about how soon each one of them can actually access the information, like information to be at their fingertips type, right? It should be accessible in a matter of seconds. Digital employee experience. It's again, each of the organization have invested a lot in terms of having various technologies, platform tools to enable the communication channel. But what enables a greater impact in the communication channel with multi-generational is a consolidated one, which becomes a one-stop shop for all internal communications, right? The last one, but not the least, sense of purpose and share of voice. How can organization involve employees across different generations on some of the important company conversations, right? Enabling their participation in some of the key decision makings. Now, obviously, this is going to actually create a much stronger sense of purpose, which results in obviously in a higher employee engagement. So in HARMAN International, we have something called employee value proposition, pillars, and promise. And this was completely created by our employees across various generations across the globe. So I would like to really summarize this way. Some of the research data shows that globally, by the next 2 decades, groups which are seen as minorities will reach majority status. And in the next couple of years, millennials are predicted to make about 65 to 75% of the global workforce, right? Now, this is what it is predicted. Now, we are all in our own journey, and those with consistent focus on this very important area of multi-generational diversity, I'm sure is going to have a competitive advantage. So with that, thank you so much, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Bindu. Thank you. It was such an enriching experience listening to all from your experiences and what all best practices in D&I space you all are, using and bringing on board. Summing it all up, I would request if you have anything additional, please feel free to share. See, virtual working has closed the biggest difference in employability of diverse talent. With work from home, which is here to stay, what we see with various policies that organizations have put in place, managers are more willing and more open to overlook the face time, which was initially very, very paramount. Nobody would like to hire someone who is not available in office. But now everybody is in the same boat, and it does not matter that much today, right? So much bigger challenges to overcome. The lagging behind today's is continuous journey towards building an inclusive environment, an ecosystem, not only within the organization, a buy-in from the leadership, but at the same time with our suppliers, with our dealers, with collaborative teams and extended markets that we work with. It's about building the overall impact, taking baby boomers along, taking multi-generational people along, making it more sustainable, building it as part of our ecosystem, something like a Midas effect. Whatever the organization collaborates with, whomsoever organization works with, they are able to imbibe it into their system, right? And it becomes the organization's DNA. Being aware of the biases, is another aspect we should look at for recruitment team, for pay parity, and keeping them under checks and balances. The best way, which I have realized to do, and also Nandini mentioned in her discussion, is that publishing the reports in public, which make the information so public that there's nothing to hide. And similarly, at our organization, TVS, we go for D&I audits, we go for BCWI, Best Companies for Women in India audits, and we try to understand what are the gaps that we see in the organization. I'm sure, the listeners would have had a good takeaway from the sessions that we, all of us had put together today. And thank you so much. Thanks. I think if there are any questions, I'm free to take, but I think most of the questions that I'm able to see are covered by us. Thanks a lot. Thank you for joining. And thanks, Harish and team, for bringing us all on board.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jyotsna, for very meticulously and beautifully moderating that amazing topic with such amazing set of panelists. And I must admit that this entire lucid discussion was an amalgamation of all of your collective experiences and expertise coming together. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this evening. Thank you once again.